In this lesson, we're going to explore several different approaches for soloing over a one-chord vamp. For the examples in this lesson, we're going to play over an E7 vamp. This is one of the most common types of vamps you'll encounter, so I feel like it's a really good place to start. We're going to tackle 6 different approaches, starting with a fairly simple pentatonic approach, and then moving into some more advanced out-sounding scales and arpeggios. My name is Jack Ruch. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. So the simplest way to get started soloing over this E7 vamp is to use the E major pentatonic scale and the E minor pentatonic scale. Here's the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic. Now hopefully these are scales that you're familiar with. If you're not, go check out my blues basics lesson that I did. I'll put the link down in the description. Now, this E major pentatonic scale will work perfectly over an E7 chord because an E7 is just essentially an E major triad with a flat 7th on top. And this major pentatonic scale doesn't have a 7th in it. So it fits perfectly over any kind of E major chord. Now, the E minor pentatonic has one note that's going to kind of stick out, and that's this minor third. The note G. That's going to clash against the major third of an E7 chord. So an easy fix for this is to just bend that minor third, the note G, up to the major third, G sharp. And this is a sound you'll hear all the time in blues. And what's great about this is it allows you to play lines that fit over this E7 chord and still use your minor pentatonic shapes that you're used to. So here I'm going to solo over this backing track now and just switch around between using the major pentatonic scale and the minor pentatonic scale, but bending that third up to the major third. And all the tabs and notation for these examples are available over on my Patreon page, so go check that out. Again, all the links are down in the description. Approach is really nice because it gives us a way to get started. But if we want to dig deeper into this, we've got to know the notes that make up an E7 chord and where they are all over the neck. And this is where arpeggios come in. So an arpeggio is just simply playing the notes of a chord in order in different positions around the neck. Right? And so looking at this E7 chord, we've got 4 notes. The notes E, G sharp, B, and D. Or by their interval names, it would be the root, the major third, the 5th, and the flat 7th. Now, to find these all over the fretboard, I like to use these sort of cage system chords. Right? This gives you an easy way to sort of map this out around the fretboard. And again, if you're unfamiliar with this, I go over this in detail in my blues basics lesson. But now I'm going to solo over the backing track using just the 4 notes from the chord and these arpeggio shapes to come up with some nice lines over this one-chord vamp. understand the basic chord tones of our E7 chord, let's get into some upper extensions. These are all the notes we can add on top of an E7 chord to add more color. Notes like the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th. And a really good way to get started with this is to look at our upper extension 7th chords, right? So if we go back to that original E7 chord, we have the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7th. Now, if we add the 9th on top of that, this note F sharp, we can build a new 4-note 7th chord by taking away the root and starting now on the 3rd and playing the 3rd, 5th, flat 7th, and 9th. That's going to give us G sharp, B, D, and F sharp, which are all the notes of a G sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, or a G sharp half diminished chord. So if we play that over an E chord, we get the sound of an E dominant 9 chord. So we can use that arpeggio to outline that sound. Now if we continue on and add the 11th, we can move our root up one more interval in the chord and now start on the 5th. And now we get the notes of a B minor 7 chord by starting on the 5th, playing the flat 7th, playing the 9th, and then introducing the 11th, the note A on top. And that gives us all the notes of a B minor 7 chord. So again, over an E bass note, we can play all these notes of this B minor 7 arpeggio to outline the sound of an E dominant 11th chord. Now we can add one more extension, and that's the 13th, right? This note C sharp. Now if we do our same method of moving the root up one interval in the chord, now we would start on the flat 7th, D, then play the 9th, F sharp, then the 11th, A, and then finally the 13th, C sharp. And that gives us the notes of a D major 7 chord. So now we can play a D major 7 arpeggio over E to get all of the upper extensions, the 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th that fit on top of an E7 chord, right? So these are really great sounds that expand on the basic harmony of an E7 chord and give you some more color, right? So now I'll play over the backing track using these 3 arpeggios, our G sharp half diminished, our B minor 7, and our D major 7. And you can see how this adds a lot more color to the overall sound and really takes you away from the basic harmony and the basic sort of blues approach of the pentatonic scale. Chord tones for E7 and all the upper extensions in order, like a scale, we get the E Mixolydian scale, which is the 5th mode of the A major scale. So all the same notes as A major, but starting with an E root note. And this is the scale that is most commonly used over a dominant 7th chord. Now it's really important when you're playing scale-based lines to have an understanding of how each interval in the scale relates back to the chord. And that's why it's great to learn these basic chord tone arpeggios and upper structure chords first. Because it gives you a deeper connection to how those notes relate back to the chord. So now I'm going to play over the E7 backing track using lines from this Mixolydian scale. And again, I'm going to be using the 5 caged shapes of this scale. So if you're unfamiliar with that, I have a link down in the description to my lesson all about the Mixolydian scale that goes a bit deeper into these scale patterns. This Mixolydian scale under our fingers, we can change one note of this scale to open the door to give us a slightly more out sound. So the note we're going to change is the 4th degree of the scale. So in the Mixolydian scale, we would have the note A would be the 4th. But what we're going to do is raise that note by a half step, and that's going to give us this E Lydian dominant scale. Right, and this is a really great sounding scale. It's actually a mode of the melodic minor scale. So E Lydian dominant shares the same notes as B melodic minor. Right, so this scale has this really beautiful kind of exotic sound by adding that raised 4th in there. And it opens the door for some new, slightly more exotic sounds. So if I play the same type of line with the regular 4th, but now change that to the raised 4th, right, you can hear how that just gives it a whole different sound, right? Right, so a really beautiful sounding scale and can be great for bending your ear and stretching things out a little bit more over these 1-chord vamps. So now I'm going to play over the backing track, and I'm going to really lean into this Lydian dominant sound to come up with some cool lines. Scale we're going to look at has an even more out there sound, and this is the half-whole diminished scale. As the name suggests, it's just a series of half steps and whole steps. So starting on E, we get the notes E, F, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, and D. So this scale is very similar to the Lydian dominant scale, except instead of a regular 9th, an F sharp, we have a flat 9, F natural, and a sharp 9, G. And so these notes really help give it an even more exotic sound, right? If we add these flat 9 and sharp 9 notes into the mix, we get some really cool flavors. Alright, so now I'll play over the backing track using this half-whole diminished scale, and you can hear how this really bends your ear and pulls you out of the normal kind of E7 harmony. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in this lesson, and this really just begins to crack the surface of what we can play over these types of one-chord vamps. In the examples, I really tried to stick to each different sound that I was demonstrating, but obviously when it comes to improvising and composing solos, you can combine together these different sounds to come up with some really great things. And by practicing each one individually, you can build up some vocabulary that hopefully will start to find its way in with some of the other things you might normally play over this type of one-chord vamp. So check out the Patreon page if you want to find the tabs and notation for all the examples in this lesson. That's a great way to support this channel. And check out all my links down in the description for my different courses I have out. My TrueFire course covers some of these sounds and scales in a little bit more depth. But thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And until next time, happy practicing and take care.